Have you ever wondered what would happen if the power that performed miracles 2,000 years ago was actually dormant within you right now, waiting to be recognized? What if everything you've been taught about Jesus Christ was just the surface of a profound truth about your own divine nature? Most people spend their entire lives searching for something outside themselves, a savior, a solution, a healing force that will transform their problems into peace. They pray to a distant God, hoping their pleas will be heard and answered. But what if the greatest spiritual revelation isn't about reaching outward, but recognizing what already exists within? Has this ever happened to you? That moment when you glimpse something greater than your human personality operating through you? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. The revolutionary insights of mystic Joel Goldsmith shatter conventional understanding of Christ. What he discovered through decades of spiritual exploration was that Christ isn't a person who lived 2,000 years ago. It's a living presence, a state of consciousness available to you in this very moment. This isn't abstract theology. It's practical mysticism that transforms your everyday experience from limitation to limitless possibility. When you truly understand Christ consciousness, something profound shifts in your perception. You recognize that what you've always thought of as you, this limited human personality with all its struggles and imperfections, is merely the surface expression of your true spiritual identity. Stay with me until the end, because this single recognition changes everything about how you experience reality. Jesus of Nazareth wasn't performing miracles through some special divine power unavailable to the rest of us. He was demonstrating what becomes possible when a human being fully recognizes their oneness with infinite source. "I can of mine own self do nothing," he said, revealing that his human personality was simply transparent to the Christ presence flowing through him. What you're about to discover might surprise you. This same Christ presence exists within you right now. It's not something you develop or earn through good behavior or spiritual practice. It's your spiritual identity that remains perfect and whole, regardless of what appears to be happening in your human experience. When this Christ consciousness awakens within you, healing becomes as natural as breathing. Physical ailments, emotional wounds, and broken relationships begin to heal not through human effort or willpower, but through the simple recognition of the perfect spiritual wholeness that has always existed beneath the appearances. The healer isn't a person or technique. It's your own awakened consciousness recognizing what has always been true. Imagine moving through life from this awareness, where every challenge becomes an invitation to let your divine nature express itself. What would change in your relationships, your health, your work, if you stopped identifying with limitation and started living from the unlimited Christ consciousness that is your birthright? This journey of awakening begins with a simple yet profound shift in perception. If these insights into Christ consciousness have touched something deep within you, join our spiritual community by hitting subscribe. I share revelations like these regularly to help you recognize and express your divine nature more fully in everyday life. This shift in perception ripples through every aspect of your existence, including your experience of abundance. Most people live in a constant state of lack, working harder, saving more, worrying about financial security. They've been conditioned by a mindset that says there's never enough. But when Christ consciousness awakens within you, something remarkable happens to this pattern of scarcity. Financial challenges that once seemed overwhelming transform into opportunities to demonstrate the infinite abundance that is your spiritual birthright. This isn't about manifesting luxury cars or mansions. though material needs are certainly met. It's about a profound inner knowing that you are connected to the source of all supply. The hidden truth is that abundance flows not from external circumstances, but from your recognition of who you truly are. A businessman facing bankruptcy discovered this revelation at one of Goldsmith's retreats. Instead of desperately chasing clients, he began each day acknowledging the Christ presence within himself and everyone he would encounter. His approach completely transformed. He stopped manipulating outcomes and started trusting the divine intelligence that knew how to prosper him, better than his human mind could imagine. Within months, major contracts appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The difference wasn't his strategy, it was his consciousness. Your journey of transformation extends beyond material concerns into the realm of emotions as well. Perhaps the most remarkable revelation occurs in how you experience feelings. In Christ consciousness, emotions still arise. You remain fully human, but they no longer define or control you. When grief, anger, or fear surface, powerfully, most people either suppress these feelings or become completely overwhelmed by them. But there's a third path that opens when you recognize your true identity. Christ consciousness provides an unshakable foundation of peace beneath the surface waves of emotions. Like the sun that remains bright above storm clouds, your true nature remains untouched by emotional weather. This doesn't mean becoming coldly detached or spiritually bypassing authentic human experience. Instead, it allows you to fully feel without becoming identified with temporary states. You can experience grief without becoming grief, anger without becoming anger, fear without becoming fear. This is true emotional freedom, not freedom from feelings, but freedom within them. The impact of this single shift in awareness ripples through all your relationships. When someone criticizes you harshly, you might still feel the sting, but you don't collapse into it or feel compelled to attack back. When disappointment arrives, you feel it fully while remaining anchored in something deeper and more stable than changing circumstances. A woman who had carried decades of resentment toward her ex-husband discovered this truth in Goldsmith's classes. She had tried everything to release her bitterness: therapy, forgiveness exercises, even medication. Nothing worked until she realized that holding on to anger was denying the Christ presence in both herself and her former spouse. Within weeks of this recognition, a healing occurred that years of effort couldn't accomplish. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic as we explore how Christ consciousness transforms your relationships with others and reveals your authentic purpose. The most profound changes often happen in these connections where your awakened awareness meets another person's journey. If any of this resonates with your own experience of spiritual awakening, write in the comments, "I recognize this truth within me." When Christ consciousness infuses your relationships, a profound transformation occurs in how you perceive others. Behind the masks of personality, behind the flaws and frustrations, you begin to recognize the same divine presence that you've discovered within yourself. This revelation completely shifts the dynamics of your interactions. Consider how we typically navigate relationships. Someone disappoints us, and we judge them based on their behavior. A colleague makes a mistake, and we label them incompetent. A family member triggers old wounds, and we react from accumulated hurt. But when you see through the lens of Christ consciousness, you recognize something deeper than these surface appearances: the spiritual perfection that exists beneath all human behavior. This doesn't mean ignoring harmful actions or enabling destructive patterns. Instead, it means responding from love rather than fear, compassion rather than judgment. A mother applied this understanding when facing her son's spiral into addiction. Every intervention had failed until she stopped seeing him as an addict and started recognizing the perfect Christ child that was his true identity. This wasn't denial. It was holding steadfast to a deeper truth while still addressing the human situation. The journey toward recovery took months, but her son later told her he could feel something different in how she looked at him. Something that helped him remember who he really was beneath the addiction. Long-standing. Conflicts naturally dissolve as you stop reacting to appearances and begin acknowledging the divine essence in everyone you encounter. The mindset shift from seeing others as separate beings competing for limited resources to recognizing them as expressions of the same consciousness creates a foundation for authentic connection. This recognition extends into how you make decisions. Most people face choices with anxiety, analyzing pros and cons, seeking advice from multiple sources, yet still feeling confused. But when Christ consciousness awakens within you, decision-making transforms from this exhausting analysis to intuitive clarity. The Christ mind within you already knows the perfect solution to every challenge, the ideal path through every confusion. A businessman who had spent weeks agonizing over a critical company decision found that after connecting with his true identity, the answer emerged with surprising clarity. Not through logical analysis, but through an inner knowing that transcended the limitations of human thinking. The decisions that flow from this place of wisdom often surprise others with their effectiveness, sometimes appearing counterintuitive to conventional thinking, yet proving remarkably successful in retrospect. You shift from striving to receive guidance to simply allowing the wisdom that has always been present to emerge naturally in your awareness. This inner clarity becomes your hidden advantage in navigating life's complexities. Rather than second-guessing yourself or seeking external validation, you learn to trust the revelations that arise from your own Christ mind. The beauty of this process is that it requires no special techniques or years of practice, only a willingness to step back from the noise of human thinking and listen to the still, small voice that speaks with absolute certainty. This voice doesn't shout or demand attention. It simply presents truth that resonates at the deepest level of your being. If you've experienced moments of this inner guidance breaking through the noise of everyday thinking, share in the comments. The wisdom was always within me. As you deepen into Christ consciousness, you'll notice a fundamental shift in how spirituality expresses itself through you. For most people, spiritual practice feels like hard work, disciplined meditation, concentrated prayer, constant vigilance over thoughts and behaviors. There's a sense of striving, of trying to become something you're not yet. But one of the most liberating revelations of Christ consciousness is that you don't need to work to become spiritual. You already are a spiritual being. This insight transforms your entire approach. Rather than struggling to attain spirituality, you simply allow your inherent divinity to flow without human interference. It's like the difference between pushing a boulder uphill and stepping into a river that's already flowing. The breakthrough moment comes when you realize that all spiritual qualities, love, peace, wisdom, harmony, aren't achievements to be earned, but expressions of your true nature waiting to be recognized. Prayer undergoes a profound metamorphosis in this awakening. It shifts from desperate petition, begging an external power for help, to quiet recognition of what has always been true. You're not trying to get God's attention. You're acknowledging the divine presence that has never been absent from your experience. Meditation transforms from concentrated effort to simply resting in conscious awareness, allowing your natural state of being to shine through the temporary clouds of human thinking. A woman who had maintained rigid spiritual disciplines for decades described her awakening as finally putting down the heavy suitcase I'd been carrying. The journey hadn't required more effort. It required less interference from her human will. This doesn't mean spiritual practices become irrelevant, but rather that they serve a different purpose. They become opportunities to remember what's already true, rather than means to achieve what's lacking. This effortless expression naturally leads to perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Christ consciousness, the transcendence of human limitations. What seemed like immovable boundaries, physical conditions, mental patterns, circumstantial constraints, begin to lose their power to restrict your experience. The Christ consciousness within you knows no boundaries, no impossibilities. It isn't subject to human laws or limitations. People who glimpse this truth often report experiencing what appears to be miraculous, chronic conditions spontaneously healing, seemingly impossible situations resolving effortlessly, long-standing mental patterns dissolving without struggle. A man who had suffered from debilitating migraines for 20 years found them simply disappearing when he stopped identifying with them as his condition and recognized the perfect wholeness of his true being. The catalyst behind these transformations isn't magical thinking or positive affirmations. It's the recognition that what appears fixed and permanent from a human perspective becomes fluid and transformable when viewed from spiritual awareness. Your circumstances haven't changed, but your relationship to them has shifted completely. You no longer see them as solid realities, but as temporary appearances on the screen of consciousness. This journey of discovering your true divine identity doesn't end here. Subscribe to continue exploring these profound spiritual truths with us. Every video is designed to awaken more of the Christ consciousness that has always been your birthright. This freedom from limitation extends beyond physical healing into every area of life: relationships, work, creativity, purpose. Doors that seemed permanently closed begin to open. Possibilities that weren't visible from a limited perspective suddenly appear. The journey becomes one of continual expansion rather than constant struggle. If you've experienced moments where limitations seemed to dissolve when you shifted your perspective, share in the comments. Limitations were only appearances. One of the most extraordinary manifestations of Christ consciousness is the awakening of creative power that has been dormant within you. Many people experience creativity as something that comes and goes unpredictably. Moments of inspiration followed by frustrating blocks. They see themselves as either creative types or not, based on their perceived talents. But when Christ consciousness awakens within you, creativity reveals itself as your natural state of being. This isn't limited to artistic expression, though artists, musicians, and writers often report a profound shift in how inspiration flows. A composer who had struggled for years with creative blocks described his awakening as removing the dam from a river that was always meant to flow. Ideas, melodies, and harmonies that once required intense effort began flowing effortlessly through his awareness. The quality of his work transformed as he recognized himself not as the originator of the music, but as the instrument through which music was expressing itself. This creative renaissance extends to every field of human endeavor: business innovations, scientific breakthroughs, educational approaches, and healing methodologies. You become a channel for divine creativity that transcends human intelligence and imagination. Solutions to complex problems emerge intuitively. Fresh perspectives reveal themselves without struggle. The insights that flow through your consciousness often surprise even you with their originality and effectiveness. Behind the scenes of this creative awakening is a profound shift in your relationship with inspiration. Rather than chasing ideas or forcing innovation, you learn to listen deeply to the wisdom that's already present within. The blueprint for your creative expression already exists in its perfect form. Your role is simply to allow it to emerge without interference from doubt, fear, or limited thinking. This awakened creativity naturally leads to a complete renovation of your sense of purpose. Most people define purpose through achievement, career advancement, wealth accumulation, recognition, or impact. Success becomes a destination to reach through determined effort. But when Christ consciousness illuminates your journey, purpose undergoes a revolutionary redefinition. Your sense of purpose shifts from personal achievement to spiritual expression. Success is no longer measured by external accomplishments, but by how clearly Christ consciousness flows through your unique gifts and abilities. The mindset completely transforms from "what can I achieve?" to "how can infinite intelligence express itself through me?" This single revelation eliminates the exhausting pressure to prove your worth through accomplishment, while paradoxically allowing your work to reach new levels of excellence and impact. A surgeon who experienced this transformation described it as no longer performing surgeries, but allowing healing to express itself through my trained hands. His technical skills remained the same, but patients reported faster recoveries and fewer complications. Colleagues noticed a calming presence in the operating room that seemed to elevate everyone's performance. Nothing external had changed, but everything was different because of his shifted awareness. Your work, whatever its external form, becomes sacred service. The administrative assistant processing paperwork, the engineer designing bridges, the parent raising children, the artist creating beauty, all become vehicles for the same divine expression. The artificial boundaries between spiritual and secular work dissolve as you recognize that all activities can be pathways for Christ consciousness to express itself in the world. If you've experienced moments where creativity seemed to flow through you rather than from you, share in the comments. I'm a channel for divine expression. Perhaps one of the most profound transformations that occurs through Christ consciousness is the liberation from patterns that have held you captive for years, sometimes decades. Most people struggle intensely with breaking free from destructive habits, addictions, or limiting behaviors. They use willpower, accountability systems, and behavior modification techniques, often experiencing temporary success followed by discouraging relapse. The underlying blueprint for these patterns remains untouched by their efforts. When Christ consciousness awakens within you, something remarkable happens to these persistent patterns. They begin to dissolve naturally, not through greater effort or discipline, but through the recognition of your true identity. The mindset shift is revolutionary. You stop fighting against who you've been and start living from who you truly are. The power of past conditioning weakens in the presence of this expanded awareness, allowing new choices to emerge from spiritual freedom rather than exhausting willpower. A man who had battled alcohol addiction for 15 years described his awakening as suddenly recognizing I was trying to fill a spiritual thirst with a material solution. The compulsion didn't disappear overnight, but its grip loosened dramatically as he connected with the wholeness that had always been his true nature. Recovery became less about resisting temptation and more about living from a different level of consciousness where the addiction had no root system. This liberation extends beyond obvious addictions into subtler patterns: chronic worry, people-pleasing, perfectionism, procrastination, conflict avoidance, or the need for control. The hidden truth behind the dissolving of these patterns isn't that you've finally become strong enough to overcome them, but that you've recognized they were never essential to who you are. They were temporary distortions in your human experience, not defining qualities of your spiritual identity. As these limitations fall away, your authentic self-expression emerges with natural clarity. Your personality doesn't disappear or become homogenized into some generic spiritual template. Instead, it remains uniquely yours, but transforms into a clear window through which divine qualities can express themselves in the world. You become what Goldsmith called a transparency for Christ, your individuality, serving as the perfect vehicle for spiritual qualities to manifest in human experience. This authentic expression brings a remarkable sense of congruence to your life. The exhausting gap between your public persona and private reality closes. The energy once spent maintaining an image becomes available for creative expression. People often comment that you seem more yourself than ever before, yet somehow different in ways they can't quite define. What they're sensing is your personality, functioning as it was always meant to, as a unique lens focusing universal consciousness. A teacher who experienced this transformation described it as finally teaching from who I am rather than what I know. Her technical expertise remained valuable, but it was now infused with a presence that connected with students at a deeper level. Some who had struggled in her subject began to flourish, not because her methods had changed dramatically, but because they were now experiencing the subject through her transformed consciousness. The journey to authentic self-expression isn't about becoming someone else. It's about allowing who you've always been beneath the layers of conditioning to shine through without interference. Your true nature has never been absent, only obscured by identification with limited concepts of yourself. If you've experienced moments where you felt most authentically yourself while simultaneously connected to something greater, share in the comments. My true self is both unique and universal. One of the most profound shifts that occurs when Christ consciousness awakens within you is how you experience love. Most people know love as an emotional reaction that depends on external conditions. It rises in response to certain people, fades in their absence, transforms into hurt when expectations aren't met. It's conditional, fluctuating, and often entangled with needs and attachments. But when Christ consciousness illuminates your awareness, love reveals itself not as something you feel occasionally, but as what you are essentially. Love transforms from a temporary emotional state to your natural way of being. You love not because others deserve it or earn it through their behavior, but because love is the very essence of your true nature. This revelation completely transforms your relationships. The boundary between those you love and those you don't begins to dissolve as you recognize the same divine presence in everyone you encounter. A woman who had maintained a mental list of people who had wronged her described her awakening as suddenly seeing through the characters in the play to the director behind all of them. The resentments she had carefully preserved for years didn't require processing or forgiveness techniques. They simply lost their foundation as she recognized the shared spiritual identity beneath all human personalities, including her own. This unconditional love doesn't mean allowing harmful behavior or remaining in damaging situations. Instead, it means responding from wisdom rather than reaction, compassion rather than judgment. Sometimes the most loving response involves establishing clear boundaries. The difference is that these boundaries emerge from clarity rather than fear, wisdom rather than wounded emotions. The breakthrough insight behind this transformation is that love isn't something you generate through effort or bestow selectively based on worthiness. It's the background radiation of existence itself, flowing naturally when you stop blocking it with judgments, grievances, and limited concepts of self and others. This revelation naturally extends into how you experience ordinary activities. The artificial divide between sacred and secular dissolves as Christ consciousness infuses every moment with spiritual significance. Business meetings, grocery shopping, household chores, traffic jams, all become opportunities for divine expression rather than mundane obligations to endure. Before you can get to the important parts of life, a man described this shift as finally understanding there are no spiritual activities, only spiritual consciousness bringing its quality to all activities. The mindset revolution eliminates the compartmentalization that keeps spirituality sequestered to special times and places. Nothing is too ordinary to be touched by the extraordinary awareness that is your true nature. Behind the scenes of this transformation is a profound shift in how you engage with the present moment. Rather than rushing through tasks to reach some future fulfillment, you discover that this moment, exactly as it is, contains everything necessary for complete expression. The dishes being washed, the report being written, the conversation being held, all become portals for Christ consciousness to express itself in practical, tangible ways. This elevation of ordinary experience doesn't require changing your external circumstances. You don't need to abandon your career for something more spiritual or drastically alter your lifestyle. The transformation happens in your relationship with what already exists. The journey becomes not about finding special experiences, but recognizing the extraordinary nature of ordinary life when viewed through awakened awareness. If you've experienced moments where ordinary activities suddenly revealed unexpected depth and meaning, share in the comments. The sacred is hidden within the ordinary. As your journey with Christ consciousness deepens, you'll begin to notice something remarkable happening in your interactions with others. Without any conscious effort on your part, your transformed awareness begins to radiate healing to everyone around you. This isn't about actively trying to heal or influence others. It happens naturally as a byproduct of your awakened consciousness. The blueprint of your spiritual identity simply shines through your human personality, touching everyone you encounter. Store clerks inexplicably find themselves smiling after brief interactions with you. Colleagues comment on the calming effect of your presence during stressful meetings. Family members feel safer and more accepted in your company without understanding why. Strangers strike up meaningful conversations, often sharing unexpectedly personal revelations. This impact doesn't come from anything you're deliberately doing or saying. It flows from who you've recognized yourself to be. A woman described this experience as suddenly realizing I wasn't just living my own life anymore. I was participating in a healing presence that extended far beyond my personal boundaries. She noticed that difficult people became less reactive around her. Conversations that would have previously escalated into conflict somehow found resolution. Children and animals seemed particularly drawn to her energy. The revelation behind this phenomenon is that consciousness is not contained within your physical form. It radiates outward, touching everything in its field. This is not personal charisma or social skills, but Christ consciousness naturally blessing others through your awareness. You become what spiritual traditions have called a light unto the world, without any effort to be special or influential. Perhaps the most profound awakening that Christ consciousness brings is a completely transformed understanding of eternal life. Most religious traditions speak of eternal life as something that begins after physical death, a future reward for right belief or behavior. But when Christ consciousness illuminates your awareness, you recognize that eternal life isn't waiting in some distant future. It's divine life, expressing itself right now through your transformed consciousness. This insight completely shifts your relationship with time. Past regrets and future anxieties begin to lose their grip as you live more fully in the eternal now. You recognize that the timeless nature of Christ consciousness is always present, regardless of changing circumstances or physical conditions. The journey isn't about earning immortality, but recognizing the deathless nature of your true identity. A man facing a terminal diagnosis described this awakening as realizing that what's experiencing this illness isn't what will experience death. The human form would complete its cycle, but the Christ consciousness expressing through that form remained eternal, untouched by physical transition. This recognition brought a profound peace that transformed his final months from a fearful countdown to a deepening awareness of his timeless nature. The hidden truth that Jesus revealed was never about establishing a religion that would worship him from a distance. It was about demonstrating the Christ consciousness that is equally present in everyone. When he said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he was speaking not from his personal identity as Jesus, but from the universal Christ presence that you are now discovering as your own true nature. If you've experienced moments where you felt completely free from time, touching something eternal, even in the midst of ordinary life, share in the comments, "I am experiencing eternal life now." As we reach this point in our exploration of Christ consciousness, take a moment to reflect on what's resonated most deeply with you. This journey of spiritual awakening isn't a destination, but an unfolding revelation, each insight opening the door to deeper understanding. If these teachings have illuminated something within you, perhaps you've found a spiritual community that speaks your language. I'd love for you to become a regular part of our conversations by subscribing to this channel. Each week, we explore these profound truths in ways that bring practical transformation to everyday life. The fact that you've stayed until this moment suggests that something here was meant specifically for you. If that's the case, simply write in the comments, "This message found me at the perfect time." Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear as they begin their own journey of awakening. If you found value in today's exploration, a simple like lets me know that these teachings are resonating and helps others discover this content as well. It's a small gesture that creates ripples of transformation beyond what we can see. For those ready to go deeper into how Christ consciousness transforms specific areas of life, I've created a companion video that explores practical application in relationships, work, and health. Click right here and continue this journey with me. The recognition that's beginning to dawn within you is just the first light of a magnificent sunrise. There comes a moment in the spiritual journey when the veil parts, and you discover that the great declaration was never meant to be a statement about a distant figure. It was an invitation into your own divine nature. When this understanding dawns, everything shifts. You cease searching outside yourself for completion. The frantic pursuit of validation, achievement, and security falls away like autumn leaves. You realize that the kingdom you've been seeking has always been within, not as a future promise, but as a present reality. This is not intellectual knowledge. It is a realization that transforms your entire being. You begin to understand that the I at the center of your consciousness is not the small, limited self you've identified with all these years. It is the very presence of God individualized as you. Not partly divine, not potentially divine, but wholly and completely divine right now. What happens when this truth penetrates your consciousness? You stop begging. You stop bargaining with an imaginary deity somewhere in the heavens. You cease the endless petitioning because you recognize that all that the Father has is already yours. The infinite storehouse is not locked away. It is your own consciousness. Fear begins to dissolve. How can you fear lack when you recognize yourself as the very outlet of infinite abundance? How can you fear disease when you understand that perfect life is the only reality? The illusions that have held you captive lose their power the moment you stop giving them the authority of belief. You become still, not the forced stillness of discipline, but the natural stillness that comes from knowing. In that stillness, you discover that you need not create good. You need only be aware of the good that already is. Your work is not to make something happen, but to let something be revealed. This is the great secret. You are not trying to reach God. You are the place where God is being expressed. Every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness is the divine saying, I am as you. When this becomes your living consciousness, you walk through the world differently. Circumstances no longer dictate your inner state. You carry within yourself the source of all supply, all wisdom, all peace. You become a transparency through which the infinite flows into visible form. This is the life you were meant to live, not as a seeker, but as a knower. The shift from external to internal reality, the realization that divinity is not outside but within your own consciousness, transforming the search for God from an external pursuit to an internal recognition. Recognition of your true identity, understanding that the I at your center is not the limited human self, but the presence of the infinite individualized as you, completely divine in this present moment. The end of supplication and fear, when you grasp your oneness with the source, begging and bargaining cease. Fear of lack and disease dissolves because you recognize yourself as the outlet of infinite supply and perfect life. From doing to being, the transition from striving and effort to stillness and awareness. Your work becomes not creating good, but recognizing the good that already exists and allowing it to be revealed through you. Living as transparency, not as seeker, moving from the role of spiritual seeker to knower, becoming a clear channel through which the infinite expresses itself in visible form, with circumstances no longer controlling your inner state. For most of your life, you have been trained to look outward. You were taught that answers lie in books, in teachers, in institutions, in sacred places far from where you stand. You were conditioned to believe that the divine dwells somewhere else, in temples, in heavens, in realms accessible only through intermediaries or complex rituals. This outward orientation has kept you perpetually searching, always reaching, never quite arriving. The spiritual marketplace thrives on this belief. It offers you methods, techniques, practices that promise to bridge the gap between you and the sacred. Attend this workshop, follow this guru, perform these ceremonies, repeat these affirmations, all of it predicated on the assumption that you are fundamentally separated from your source, that you are incomplete, lacking, and must acquire something you do not currently possess. This is the great illusion that has held humanity in bondage for millennia. It creates a spiritual poverty consciousness where you see yourself as a beggar at the gates of abundance, a sinner seeking redemption, a fragment longing to return to wholeness. Every prayer becomes a petition. Every meditation becomes a striving. Every moment becomes evidence of your insufficiency. But there comes a sacred turning point. It often arrives not through more seeking, but through exhaustion with seeking. You have tried everything external. You have accumulated knowledge, attended countless gatherings, practiced endless techniques, and still the fundamental sense of separation remains. In that moment of surrender, when the external search collapses, something extraordinary can happen. You turn within, not as another technique, not as another place to search, but as a simple recognition. And in that inward turn, you discover what has always been present. The kingdom you sought in distant lands exists as your own consciousness. The presence you imagined dwelling in far-off realms is the very awareness with which you are aware. The divine you believed you had to reach is the life that is living you right now. This is not a metaphor. This is not poetry meant to inspire while leaving you unchanged. This is literal truth. The infinite intelligence that created galaxies, that orchestrates the perfect rhythm of seasons, that knows how to transform a seed into a redwood, this same intelligence is the consciousness at your center. Not a portion of it, not a reflection of it, but the very thing itself individualized as you. When this recognition dawns, The entire structure of your spiritual life reorganizes. You stop projecting your divinity onto external authorities. You cease giving away your power to those who claim to know more, to be more connected, to have special access to truth. You recognize that every teacher, every teaching, every sacred text can only point you back to what you already are. Your prayer life transforms completely. You no longer approach consciousness as a beggar approaches a king. You no longer catalogue your problems and present them to an external power hoping for intervention. Instead, prayer becomes recognition. Meditation becomes awareness. Spiritual practice becomes the simple acknowledgement of what is already true. The frantic quality dissolves. The spiritual anxiety that drove you from teacher to teacher, from practice to practice, loses its grip. Not because you have found the right external answer, but because you have discovered there is nowhere to go. The treasure was never buried in distant fields. It has always been in your own backyard. More accurately, it has always been you. This shift from external to internal is not a geographical change. It is a complete revolution in understanding. You realize that every moment you spent searching outside yourself was a moment spent denying your own nature. Every authority you elevated was a denial of the authority already resident in your own being. You have lived your entire life under a case of mistaken identity. You have believed yourself to be a limited creature bound by history, defined by circumstances, confined within the narrow parameters of personality and conditioning. You look in the mirror and see a name, a face, a story of successes and failures, of wounds and triumphs. You think this is who you are. But this person you believe yourself to be is only the surface, the outermost garment of your true nature. Beneath the accumulated layers of personal history, beneath the thoughts and emotions that rise and fall like waves, beneath even your deepest beliefs about yourself, there exists an I that has nothing to do with your biography. This is not the ego that defends itself, that compares itself to others, that fears inadequacy and craves recognition. This I existed before you were given a name. It will exist when all the details of your personal story have dissolved into forgotten memory. It is the witness that has been present through every experience of your life, unchanging while everything else changes. Most people spend their entire lives identified with the wrong I. They think they are the limited self, the one who was born and will die, the one who succeeds or fails, who is sick or well, who has or lacks. This misidentification is the root of all suffering. When you believe you are the limited self, you live in perpetual vulnerability. Everything becomes a potential threat to your existence, your security, your happiness. But there is another I, speaking in the depths of your being. It has been speaking all along, though its voice has been drowned out by the noise of personal concerns. This I doesn't I am sick, or I am poor, or I am afraid. It simply says I am, without qualification, without limitation, without any adjectives that would reduce infinity to something finite. This is not your personal identity speaking. This is the voice of the infinite itself, declaring its presence as you. When you touch this I, you discover that you are not a separate entity trying to connect with God. You are the very presence of God individualized, not a part of God, not a creation separate from the Creator, but God being God as you. This recognition shatters every limitation you have accepted. How can you be inadequate when your true nature is infinite intelligence? How can you lack anything when you are the substance of all supply? How can you be powerless when omnipotence is your very essence? The limitations exist only in the false identification with the small self, the personal sense of I. Understanding this intellectually changes nothing. Millions have heard these words and remained exactly as they were. But when this truth penetrates beyond the intellect into direct realization, when you actually experience yourself as this divine, I am, everything transforms. You do not become divine. You recognize that you have never been anything else. The implications are staggering. It means that in this very moment, regardless of what appears in your experience, regardless of what circumstances surround you, regardless of what diagnosis you have received or what bank balance you carry, your true identity remains infinite, perfect, and complete. The divine is not your potential, it is your actuality. You are not becoming spiritual. You are recognizing what has always been true. This is why the great mystics speak with such certainty. They are not hoping, not believing, not having faith in something uncertain. They have discovered their true identity. They know who they are, and in that knowing, they have found an unshakable foundation that no circumstance can disturb, no condition can threaten, no experience can diminish. When you live under the belief that you are separate from your source, your entire life becomes an exercise in supplication. You approach each day with an underlying anxiety, a sense that something essential is missing and must be obtained from outside yourself. Your prayers become shopping lists presented to a distant power. Your spiritual practice becomes a form of bargaining. If I am good enough, devoted enough, faithful enough, perhaps I will receive what I need. This relationship with the divine mirrors the consciousness of poverty. You see yourself as lacking, and you imagine a great storehouse of supplies somewhere beyond your reach. Health exists, but you do not have it. Abundance exists, but it eludes you. Peace exists, but it remains outside your grasp, and so you beg, you plead, you promise. You perform religious duties hoping to earn favor, to tip the cosmic scales in your direction. But what happens when you recognize your true identity? When you understand that the infinite is not separate from you, but is actually constituting your very being? The entire foundation of supplication crumbles. How can you beg yourself for what you already are? How can you petition your own consciousness to give you what is already the substance of that consciousness? You begin to see that lack has never been a reality. It has only been a belief. The infinite cannot lack anything, and if the infinite is your true nature, then you cannot lack anything. Not potentially, not someday when you become more spiritual, but right now. The appearance of lack is nothing more than a failure to recognize what already is. This recognition dismantles fear at its root. Fear of poverty cannot survive the realization that you are infinite supply itself. Not that you have access to supply, not that supply will come to you if you think the right thoughts or perform the right actions, but that your very consciousness is the substance from which all form appears. How can substance lack anything? How can the source run dry? Fear of disease loses its power in the same way. When you understand that perfect life is not something you must acquire, but is the reality of your being, disease is recognized for what it is, a belief in something opposed to life, a temporary appearance accepted as real. You are not trying to get rid of disease, you are withdrawing the belief that gives it power. You are not trying to become healthy, you are recognizing the health that is already the truth of your being. Fear of death itself transforms. How can that which is infinite die? How can the eternal have a beginning or an ending? The person may appear and disappear, but the I am at your center is untouched by the cycles of birth and death. You recognize yourself as life itself, and life cannot die. It can only take different forms. This does not mean you become passive or fatalistic. Quite the opposite. You become immensely practical Because you are no longer operating from fear and desperation. You make decisions from a place of inner abundance rather than outer lack. You take action not to fill a void, but to express the fullness that you are. The change is profound. Where there was anxiety, there is now peace. Where there was grasping, there is now allowing. Where there was the constant stress of trying to make something happen, there is now the restful awareness that everything necessary is already present. You stop living as a beggar and begin living as what you have always been. The very presence of infinite abundance expressing itself in individual form. Your relationship with circumstance changes completely. Conditions no longer have the power to disturb your inner knowing. A depleted bank account cannot convince you of poverty when you know yourself as infinite supply. A medical diagnosis cannot convince you of death when you know yourself as eternal life. The spiritual path, as it is commonly understood, is a path of doing. You are given practices to perform, techniques to master, disciplines to maintain. Meditate for this many minutes. Repeat these affirmations. Visualize these outcomes. Fast on these days. The underlying message is always the same. You must do something to achieve a spiritual state you do not currently possess. This approach keeps you perpetually engaged in effort. Your spiritual life becomes another form of work, another arena where you must perform, improve, and achieve. You measure your progress by how well you maintain your practices, how consistently you apply your techniques, how disciplined you remain in your efforts. And beneath it all runs the exhausting assumption that you are responsible for creating your own good. But something shifts when you recognize your true nature. The frantic doing begins to quiet. You start to understand that you are not trying to create good. Good already is. You are not trying to make something happen. Everything necessary is already present in consciousness. Your work is not to manufacture reality, but to perceive reality as it actually is. This is the movement from doing to being. It is not laziness. It is not passivity. It is actually the most profound activity possible, the activity of awareness itself. You begin to live from stillness rather than striving, not the forced stillness that comes from suppressing your thoughts or controlling your mind, but the natural stillness that arises when you stop believing you must make something happen. In this stillness, you discover something extraordinary. The good you have been working so hard to create has always been present. Health is already the truth of being. Supply is already infinite in consciousness. Harmony is already the nature of reality. These are not goals to be achieved in the future. They are facts to be recognized in the present moment. Your entire approach to life reorganizes around this recognition. Instead of beginning your day by making plans to create good, you begin by acknowledging the good that already is. Instead of looking at a problem and immediately thinking about what you must do to fix it, you pause and ask, what is the truth here? What is already present that I am not seeing? This does not mean you take no action in the world. You still engage with life, make decisions, participate in your affairs. But the action flows from a different source. It is no longer driven by fear or lack. It is no longer the desperate activity of someone trying to fill a void. It becomes the natural expression of the fullness that you are. You begin to understand the meaning of effortless effort. Things happen through you rather than by you. Solutions appear without the strain of forcing them. Doors open without the exhaustion of pushing them. Not because you have mastered some technique of manifestation, but because you have stopped blocking the natural flow of good with your beliefs in limitation. This is the great secret hidden in plain sight. Grace is not something you earn through effort. It is something you allow by ceasing to obstruct it. The infinite is always seeking to express itself as your individual experience. Your work is not to make this happen, but to remove the barriers of false belief that prevent you from seeing it. Prayer becomes something entirely different in this consciousness. You are not asking for things you lack. You are not trying to convince an unwilling deity to grant your requests. You are simply resting in the awareness of what is already true. You are acknowledging reality rather than begging for it to change. Meditation transforms from a practice you perform to a state you inhabit. You are not trying to achieve a special state of consciousness. You are simply being aware of the consciousness that is already present, already perfect, already complete. Most of your spiritual journey, you have been a seeker. This identity has defined you. You have read the books, attended the classes, followed the teachers, practiced the methods. You have been on a quest, searching for something you believed was missing, reaching for an experience you thought was just beyond your grasp. The seeker identity feels noble, dedicated, sincere, but it is actually the final barrier to realization. As long as you are seeking, you are affirming that you have not found. As long as you are trying to become spiritual, you are declaring that you are not spiritual now. The very act of seeking reinforces the illusion of separation. It keeps you forever in the future, forever approaching but never arriving, forever almost there but not quite. The transition from seeker to knower is not gradual. It is instantaneous. It happens in the moment you stop looking for what you already are. You realize that the consciousness seeking God is God seeking to know itself as you. The journey was never about going somewhere. It was about waking up to where you have always been. When you live as a knower rather than a seeker, everything changes. You stop collecting spiritual experiences like trophies. You stop measuring your progress against others. You stop worrying whether you are doing it right, whether you are spiritual enough, whether you have achieved the proper state. All of that anxiety belongs to the seeker, and you are no longer that. The knower does not claim to know everything. The knower simply rests in the awareness of their true identity. This knowing is not intellectual. You can have a library of spiritual knowledge and still be a seeker. Knowing is a state of consciousness, a recognition that has moved from the head to the heart, from theory to living experience. From this knowing, you become what the mystics call a transparency. You are no longer trying to be spiritual. You are simply allowing the infinite to be itself as you. Like a clear window pane does not create light, but allows light to pass through unobstructed, you do not create good, but allow the good that already is to flow into visible expression. This transparency is your natural state. You are not trying to become it. You are removing whatever blocks it. Every false belief you release, every limitation you stop accepting, every fear you see through makes you more transparent. Not more holy, not more advanced, simply more clear. More available for life to live itself as you. Living as transparency means circumstances lose their power over your inner state. The knower does not depend on conditions to be at peace. Peace is not found in situations. It is the nature of your being. When you know this, you can move through difficulty without being disturbed at your center. You can face challenges without losing your grounding, not because you have developed great spiritual strength, but because you have recognized what cannot be shaken. The world sees this and calls it wisdom, calls it grace, calls it spiritual attainment. But from the inside, it is simply being what you are. There is no effort in it. There is no maintenance required. You are not holding yourself in some elevated state that might collapse if you lose focus. You have simply recognized reality, and that recognition, once established, does not depend on your effort to sustain it. This is the life that becomes possible when seeking ends and knowing begins. You stop chasing experiences and start living from the one experience that matters, the recognition of your true identity. You stop trying to reach God and start being the place where God is expressed. You move through the world not as someone looking for the sacred, but as someone who has discovered that the sacred is looking through your eyes. This entire journey from seeker to knower, from doing to being, from outer dependence to inner recognition, this is the unfoldment of consciousness that changes everything. It is not a destination you will reach someday. It is an awakening available in this very moment. You stand now at the threshold. Not the threshold of something you must attain, but the threshold of something you must recognize. Behind you lies the exhausting path of seeking, striving, and supplication. Before you lies the rest that comes from knowing. The choice is not difficult. It requires only that you stop, turn within, and acknowledge what has always been true. When you live from this inner knowing, you discover that you have become a benediction to the world, not through great works or mighty achievements, but simply by being transparent to the infinite. Your very presence becomes a healing influence because you are no longer broadcasting the consciousness of lack, fear, and limitation. You are radiating the peace that comes from recognizing your true nature. This is the message that has echoed through the ages, spoken in different words by every mystic who has ever awakened. You are not what you have believed yourself to be. You are not the limited, lacking, fearful creature of personal sense. You are the infinite itself, expressing as individual being. Take this truth into the silence of your own consciousness. Let it work in you. Not as something to be accomplished, but as something to be realized. And in that realization, you will discover what the great teachers have always known: the kingdom of heaven is not coming. It is here. The divine presence is not distant. It is you. The life you have been seeking to live has been living you all along. I am. And in those two words, spoken in the depth of your being, lies all the truth you will ever need to know. Have you ever found yourself on your knees, pouring your heart out in prayer, desperately seeking the peace and transformation that Jesus promised, only to feel like heaven remains frustratingly out of reach? What if I told you that for 2,000 years, humanity has been searching for the kingdom of heaven in all the wrong places, while Jesus was pointing to something so close, so immediate, that most people walk right past it every single day? Think about this for a moment. Jesus didn't say, "The kingdom of heaven will come to you someday if you're good enough." He didn't say it's waiting for you after death in some distant celestial realm. He made a declaration so radical, so paradigm-shattering, that even today most people completely miss its profound implications. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is within you, not will be within you, not might be within you if you pray harder or believe stronger. Is within you, right now, in this very moment." Has this ever happened to you? You read these words in Scripture, and something deep in your soul recognizes their truth, yet your everyday experience seems to contradict this promise entirely. You still struggle with fear, with lack, with illness, with the weight of life's challenges. You wonder, if the kingdom is truly within me, why don't I experience it? Why does peace feel so elusive? Why do miracles seem reserved for someone else, somewhere else, some other time? But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me, because what you're about to discover might completely transform everything you thought you knew about spirituality, about prayer, about your relationship with the divine. The truth is, we've been conditioned from childhood to seek God outside ourselves. We've been taught to look up to the heavens, to search in holy buildings, to find God in ancient texts and sacred rituals. We speak to God as if addressing someone far away, hoping our words somehow bridge an immense distance between us and the divine. This mindset of separation has created a spiritual journey that often feels like an endless pursuit of something perpetually just beyond our fingertips. We strive, we perform, we perfect our prayers, and still, that deep sense of heaven on earth eludes us. But what if this entire approach has been built on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if Jesus wasn't giving us another religious concept to add to our belief system, but revealing the most revolutionary truth ever spoken? The kingdom within isn't a beautiful metaphor or inspirational poetry. It's the literal reality of where divine presence actually dwells. And understanding what Jesus truly meant by these words changes absolutely everything about how we experience God, how we pray, how we face our challenges, and why the miraculous life He demonstrated is not just possible for you, but inevitable once you grasp this single profound truth. And it all begins with recognizing where you've been taught to look and where Jesus was actually pointing. The hidden truth that unlocks everything lies in understanding two of the simplest words ever spoken. When Jesus repeatedly declared, "I am," He wasn't just introducing Himself or making casual conversation. These two words contain the entire essence of spiritual power, and once you grasp their true meaning, your entire relationship with the divine undergoes a complete transformation. Think about the profound statements Jesus made throughout His ministry. I am the light of the world. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. For centuries, we've interpreted these declarations as Jesus claiming something unique to Himself alone, something that separated Him from the rest of humanity. We've placed Him on a pedestal so high that His consciousness seems unreachable, His awareness impossibly distant from our own experience. But what if we've completely misunderstood His message? What if every time Jesus said, "I am," He wasn't claiming exclusive divinity, but demonstrating a consciousness available to every single person? Behind the scenes of these powerful declarations was a recognition so revolutionary that it threatened every religious system of His time. Jesus was revealing that the I at your core, the awareness reading these words right now, is not separate from God, but is the very presence of God individualized. This isn't philosophy or theological wordplay. This is the kingdom within that Jesus kept pointing to. The I am consciousness is the divine reality that exists before all your thoughts, before your circumstances, before your life story, before every condition and limitation you've ever experienced. It's the eternal awareness that has been present your entire life, witnessing every moment, unchanged by anything that has ever happened to you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring how this understanding creates a complete paradigm shift in your entire spiritual journey. Most of us have been approaching our relationship with God from a position of separation. We see ourselves as limited human beings down here, trying desperately to reach a God up there. We strive to become more spiritual, more worthy, more evolved, hoping that one day we'll finally bridge the gap between our human limitation and divine perfection. But recognizing the I am within shatters this entire framework. Suddenly, you're not a separate person trying to find God. You're God expressing as this unique individual experience. The kingdom isn't something you enter after accumulating enough spiritual merit or after your body dies. It's the eternal reality of what you are, right? Now, beneath all the layers of conditioning, beneath every belief about yourself, beneath every story you've been told about who you are, this revelation transforms everything about your spiritual journey. Instead of seeking something absent, you're recognizing something present. Instead of striving to become something you're not, you're remembering what you've always been. Instead of trying to close the gap between you and God, you're awakening to the truth that there never was a gap to begin with. The transformation isn't about gaining something new. It's about unveiling what has always been true, hidden in plain sight within your own consciousness. The impact of this shift cannot be overstated. Your prayers change, your decisions change, your entire mindset about life and its challenges undergoes a fundamental revolution. And this is precisely why Jesus could promise that you would do even greater works than he did. Because once you recognize the same I am consciousness within yourself that he lived from, if this revelation is beginning to shift something in how you see yourself and your relationship with the divine, write in the comments, I recognize the I am within me. The revelation becomes even more powerful when you understand why most people walk through their entire lives, never experiencing the kingdom that Jesus promised is within them. The answer is both simple and profound. We've been looking in completely the wrong direction, attaching our identity to things that were never meant to define us. Listen to how casually we speak about ourselves throughout the day. I am sick. I am broke. I am anxious. I am not good enough. I am stuck. We throw these statements around without realizing the immense impact they're having on our experience. Every single time you say I am, followed by a limitation or condition, you're doing something extraordinary. You're claiming that the eternal, infinite presence within you is somehow bound by temporary circumstances. If this resonates with you, subscribe to continue exploring these deeper truths that transform how we understand Jesus' teachings. Think about the hidden mechanics behind this pattern. When you identify with a condition, you've placed all your attention on the waves of experience while completely forgetting you are the ocean itself. The waves come and go, constantly changing, rising and falling. But the ocean remains, vast and unaffected, beneath every movement on its surface. This forgotten awareness, this temporary amnesia about your true nature, is the only thing standing between you and the experience of heaven on earth that Jesus described. The transformation journey begins the moment you recognize this pattern in yourself. Your problems aren't the actual obstacle. Your identification with those problems is what keeps the kingdom hidden from your experience. The condition isn't what limits you. Your decision to claim that condition as your identity is what creates the sense of limitation. Now, I want to explore what happens when you live from the opposite awareness, because this is where the real power of Jesus' ministry becomes clear. What made his impact so extraordinary wasn't that he possessed supernatural abilities that the rest of us lack. Behind the scenes of every miracle was something far more accessible than special powers. It was his unwavering recognition of the kingdom within himself and within every person he encountered. Jesus never once said, I am sick, or I am limited, or I am separate from my source. His consciousness remained absolutely steady in its recognition of divine presence as his only true identity. When he approached someone who was ill, he didn't see a sick person. He saw past the temporary condition to the kingdom of perfect wholeness within them. His awareness didn't agree with the appearance of disease. It recognized the eternal truth beneath the appearance. When he multiplied loaves and fishes, he wasn't performing magic tricks or bending the laws of physics. He was operating from a consciousness that knew the kingdom within as infinite supply. There was no sense of lack in his awareness, no belief in limitation, no agreement with the appearance of scarcity. His mindset remained anchored in the reality of abundance that exists within the kingdom, and that inner reality manifested as outer provision. Even when he walked on water, defying what we consider natural laws, he was simply demonstrating what becomes possible when consciousness knows itself as one with divine presence, rather than identified with material limitation. Every miracle was the kingdom within, made visible through unwavering recognition. The power wasn't in Jesus as a special person. The power was in the consciousness he lived from, a consciousness that never forgot what it truly was. This is the revelation that changes everything about how we understand our own potential, because if Jesus' power came from his consciousness rather than from being a unique exception to humanity, if you're beginning to recognize the pattern of how you've been identifying with conditions rather than with the kingdom within, type in the comments, "I see where I've been looking." This brings us to one of the most profound revelations about human suffering and why we experience so much pain despite Jesus' promise of the kingdom within. Every ounce of suffering you've ever experienced, every moment of fear, every sense of lack, every feeling of separation, all of it stems from a single source. It's not punishment from God. It's not karma. It's not because life is inherently painful. All suffering exists because we've temporarily forgotten the kingdom within. When you identify with your body, vulnerability becomes your experience. You feel fragile, threatened by circumstances, worried about illness and aging. When you identify with your circumstances, limitation defines your reality. You feel trapped by situations, constrained by conditions that seem beyond your control. When you identify with your thoughts and emotions, you experience constant turbulence, tossed around by every passing feeling and mental pattern. But here's what's happening behind the scenes of this experience. None of these things you're identifying with are actually the kingdom that Jesus was pointing to. Your body is not the kingdom. Your circumstances are not the kingdom. Your thoughts and feelings are not the kingdom. These are all temporary waves on the surface, constantly changing, rising and falling. The kingdom is the unchanging awareness behind all these changing experiences, the eternal presence that remains whole and complete, regardless of what appears on the surface. Think about it this way. Right now, as you're listening to these words, there's an awareness present. That awareness has been with you your entire life. It was there when you were 5 years old, and it's here now. It witnessed every experience you've ever had without being damaged by any of them. It's the constant observer, the unchanging presence, the eternal I am that has never been sick, never been broke, never been afraid, because it exists prior to all conditions. Suffering exists only in the space where this recognition is absent. The moment you remember what you truly are, suffering loses its grip. Not because your circumstances have changed, but because you've stopped identifying with what was never your true nature to begin with. Now, I want to share what might be the most liberating aspect of this entire teaching, because it completely transforms the typical spiritual journey that most people find themselves on. We've been taught that accessing the kingdom requires years of dedicated practice, that we need to develop ourselves spiritually, earn divine favor through good behavior, or achieve some elevated state of consciousness through intense effort. But Jesus' revelation shatters this entire approach. The kingdom within isn't something you need to create. It's not something you need to develop or cultivate like a skill. It doesn't need to be earned through spiritual performance or perfect living. The truth that changes everything is this simple statement: it already is. This creates a radical shift in your entire mindset about spirituality. Instead of frantically doing more practices, attending more workshops, reading more books, trying harder to be spiritual enough, you simply recognize what has always been true. The transformation isn't about becoming something different. It's about stopping the identification with what you are not. The kingdom isn't absent from your experience, waiting to arrive someday when you've finally done enough spiritual work. It's present right now, expressing as the very consciousness that's taking in these words. Your only real work, your only genuine spiritual practice, is learning to stop claiming temporary conditions as your identity, allowing the kingdom that has always been present to be recognized and lived from. This shift from doing to being changes every decision you make about your spiritual journey, because suddenly you're not trying to reach somewhere you're not. If this understanding is beginning to shift how you see your own spiritual path, write in the comments, "I'm recognizing what already is." Let's bring this understanding into the practical realities of everyday life, because this is where the kingdom within becomes more than beautiful philosophy. It becomes the catalyst for genuine transformation in the areas where most of us struggle most intensely. Consider what happens when you face a health challenge. The natural conditioned response is immediate. You feel symptoms, you receive a diagnosis, and without even thinking about it, you declare, "I am sick." Those 3 words seem innocent enough, just a description of your current experience. But something profound happens the moment you claim that identity. You've taken the infinite presence within you, the kingdom that Jesus described as your true nature, and bound it to a temporary physical condition. This doesn't mean denying what your body is experiencing or refusing to seek appropriate medical care. That's not what Jesus was teaching. The hidden truth is more subtle and more powerful. Beneath all physical appearances, beneath every symptom and diagnosis, lies an unchanging reality of perfect wholeness. The kingdom within has never been sick, can never be sick, because it exists beyond the physical realm entirely. When you shift your mindset to rest in this knowing, something remarkable begins to unfold. Healing happens naturally, not because you've performed some spiritual technique correctly or manipulated universal energy. The transformation occurs because you've aligned your consciousness with the kingdom that knows no disease, no limitation, no imperfection. You've stopped claiming the condition as your identity and remembered what you truly are. The impact of this recognition extends far beyond physical health. Think about how most people approach their financial reality. There's a constant undercurrent of worry, a persistent anxiety about having enough, making ends meet, surviving in a world that seems designed around scarcity. Behind the scenes of this struggle is a consciousness of lack, a mindset that sees limitation everywhere and operates from the belief that supply comes from external sources that might run dry. But Jesus demonstrated something radically different. He told us explicitly not to worry about what we'll eat or what we'll wear, not because these things don't matter, but because the kingdom within contains infinite provision. When he fed thousands with a few loaves and fishes, he wasn't performing a magic trick to impress people. He was operating from a consciousness that recognized the kingdom as his source, and from that recognition, material supply manifested naturally. This isn't positive thinking where you pretend everything is fine while ignoring practical needs. It's a fundamental recognition that changes your entire relationship with material reality. The same presence that sustains galaxies, that maintains the orbit of planets, that grows forests and fills oceans, is expressing as your individual life right now. That presence contains within itself everything needed for your journey. Not someday, not when you've earned it, right now. The shift happens when you stop looking to external circumstances as your source and recognize the kingdom within as the true supply. Your decisions about money change. Your relationship with abundance transforms. The anxiety that once dominated your financial thinking begins to dissolve. Not because your bank account suddenly fills up, but because you've remembered where your true security lies. Now, I want to explore how this same recognition transforms another critical area of human experience, because when you begin to live from the kingdom within, every relationship in your life undergoes a profound shift. If you're beginning to see how the kingdom within changes your approach to health and material concerns, put in the comments, "The kingdom is my source." The beauty of this teaching is that it isn't reserved for mountaintop meditation sessions or special spiritual moments. Living from the kingdom within happens in the ordinary rhythm of everyday life, through simple recognition in the moments most of us overlook completely. Think about how your typical day begins. You open your eyes, and within seconds, your mind floods with everything that's wrong, everything that needs fixing, every problem waiting for you. This habitual pattern sets the tone for your entire experience. But what if, in that first moment of waking consciousness, you paused and recognized something different? Not as an affirmation you're trying to convince yourself of, but as acknowledgement of what's actually true. The kingdom of God is expressing as this new day. That simple recognition shifts your entire foundation. You're not a struggling person facing another difficult day. You're the kingdom itself, taking form as this unique expression of life. The impact of this shift might seem subtle at first, but it changes the energy you carry into every interaction, every decision, every challenge that unfolds. If this message touched something deep within you, show it with a like. It helps others on the same journey find their way here. When you face a choice, instead of anxiously trying to figure out the right answer from your limited human perspective, you recognize the kingdom within contains infinite intelligence guiding this choice. You're not alone, desperately trying to make the perfect decision. You're drawing from a wellspring of wisdom that has access to information your conscious mind could never process. The transformation becomes even more powerful in how you relate to other people. Most of our relationship struggles come from seeing others as separate beings who might hurt us, disappoint us, or withhold what we need from them. But when you recognize the kingdom in me meets the kingdom in them, everything changes. You're not interacting with their personality or their problems. You're recognizing the divine presence within them, even when they've forgotten it themselves. This isn't pretending or trying to make something true through positive thinking. It's recognition of what is already true beneath all appearances, patiently waiting to be acknowledged. Behind the scenes of every moment, the kingdom is present, expressing, creating, sustaining. Your awareness simply learns to see what has always been there. Now we arrive at one of the most extraordinary promises Jesus ever made, and finally we can understand why he spoke it with such absolute confidence. He declared that we would do even greater works than his own miracles. Think about that statement for a moment. The man who healed the incurable, multiplied food from nothing, walked on water and rose from death, said you would do even greater things. For centuries, this promise has seemed impossible, perhaps even arrogant to claim. But now the hidden truth becomes clear. Jesus wasn't suggesting we'd develop superior supernatural abilities or that future generations would be more spiritually advanced. The revelation is simpler and more profound. Once you recognize the kingdom within yourself, the same creative power that flowed through Jesus flows through you. The miracles he performed weren't the result of special techniques he mastered or divine favoritism he somehow earned. They were the natural expression of a consciousness that knew itself as one with the infinite kingdom. Greater works become possible not through what you do, but through what you recognize yourself to be. The power isn't in the actions. The power is in the consciousness from which those actions emerge. This understanding completely reframes what's actually possible in your life, because if the same kingdom that expressed through Jesus exists within you right now, If you're beginning to sense the profound implications of Jesus' promise becoming real in your own experience, type in the comments, "Greater works are possible through me." Let me be completely honest with you about something crucial on this journey, because pretending it's always easy would be doing you a disservice. Living from the kingdom within doesn't mean every challenge instantly dissolves the moment you recognize this truth. You'll face moments where, despite your deepest recognition, your circumstances seem stubbornly unchanged. The bills still land in your mailbox. The health challenge persists. The difficult relationship remains complicated. The job situation stays uncertain. In these moments, doubt creeps in with a seductive whisper. "See, this isn't working. The kingdom teaching is just beautiful. Philosophy, not practical reality. You need to stop this spiritual nonsense and deal with the real world." This is where most people abandon the path, convinced that because they don't see immediate external evidence, nothing is actually happening. But here's the hidden truth about how transformation actually works. The kingdom operates in consciousness first, not in conditions. Think about a seed planted in soil. For weeks, you see nothing above ground. No visible evidence that anything is happening. But beneath the surface, an entire root system is developing, drawing nutrients, establishing the foundation that will eventually support visible growth. The same process happens with consciousness. Sometimes the inner shift and outer manifestation happen simultaneously, and you witness what appears to be instant miracle. More often, the inner work requires consistent practice before physical evidence appears. Your task during this invisible stage isn't to make things happen through force of will or to anxiously check every day for signs of change. Your work is to remain faithful to the kingdom reality regardless of appearances, trusting that consciousness always eventually outpictures as experience. The challenge is that we've been trained to trust only what we can see with physical eyes, to believe only what manifests in material form. But Jesus demonstrated repeatedly that consciousness precedes manifestation, that the inner reality creates the outer experience, not the other way around. Now, I want to explore how this understanding revolutionizes one of the most important areas of human experience. Because when you begin recognizing the kingdom within yourself, every relationship in your life undergoes profound transformation. Think about most relationship problems you've witnessed or experienced. Behind the scenes, beneath all the surface conflicts and disappointments, lies a single root cause. We seek completion in another person. We look for someone to fill our emptiness, to validate our worth, to make us feel whole and lovable. We enter relationships from a place of lack, unconsciously expecting another person to provide what we believe we're missing. This creates an impossible dynamic where two incomplete people are trying to extract completeness from each other, leading to disappointment, resentment, and endless struggle. But when you recognize the kingdom within as your completeness, everything shifts at the foundation. You no longer seek love, because you've discovered you are love itself, expressing in unique form. You don't need validation from others because you know the inherent worth of the kingdom that you are. Relationships stop being about getting what you lack and become about sharing the wholeness you've recognized within yourself. This doesn't mean you stop desiring connection or partnership. It means the entire energy of how you relate transforms. You meet others from kingdom to kingdom, seeing past their temporary behaviors and personality patterns to the divine presence within them. Even when someone acts from their wounds, from their forgetting, from their pain, you recognize that beneath it all lies the same infinite presence that exists within you. The impact of this shift on your relationships cannot be overstated, because suddenly you're no longer in conflict with people who are simply reflecting back to you the areas where you haven't yet fully recognized your own wholeness. If you've noticed, Your relationships beginning to shift as you've deepened into this recognition. Write in the comments, I see the kingdom in others. The ultimate transformation happens when this recognition stops being something you practice during meditation or remember during challenges and becomes your constant living reality. This is the integration that Jesus demonstrated so completely. You're no longer a person searching for God's kingdom somewhere out there. You're the kingdom itself, appearing as this unique individual expression, moving through the world while never forgetting what you truly are. This doesn't turn you into some perfectly behaved saint who never makes mistakes or feels difficult emotions. That's not what Jesus was demonstrating either. You still make decisions, experience the full range of human feelings, navigate complex challenges. You still have preferences, make choices, interact with the messy reality of being human. But underneath all of it, beneath every experience, lies an unshakable knowing of what you are. From this awareness, something remarkable happens naturally. You begin creating transformation wherever you go, not through effort or technique, but simply by being yourself. The kingdom made visible. Your presence carries a different quality. Your words land differently. People sense something in you that they can't quite name but are drawn to nonetheless. Behind the scenes, consciousness is doing its work, not because you're trying to fix or heal or save anyone, but because the kingdom recognizing itself has an inherent healing impact. Think about the profound shift this creates in how you move through daily life. You're not performing spirituality or trying to maintain some elevated state. You're simply being what you've always been, now with full awareness. The decisions you make come from a different place. The challenges you face are met with a different energy. The relationships you engage in reflect a different understanding. Now, I want you to grasp the true nature of what Jesus was offering when he spoke about the kingdom within, because this changes everything about how we understand his entire ministry and message. His words weren't meant to create another religious philosophy for scholars to debate in theological circles. They weren't abstract concepts to believe in or doctrines to defend. Jesus was extending a direct invitation to discover what you already are beneath every layer of conditioning, beneath every false belief about yourself, beneath every story you've been told about who you're supposed to be. Every single moment of your life offers a fresh opportunity to remember the kingdom. Every challenge that arises becomes a doorway to deeper recognition rather than evidence of your separation from God. Every interaction with another person becomes sacred when you see it as the kingdom recognizing itself through different expressions. The journey you're on isn't about becoming something you're not. It's about unveiling what has always been true. This is the hidden truth that transforms everything. The kingdom of heaven isn't a future destination you're traveling toward. It's not a reward waiting for you beyond death if you've lived correctly. It's not something that will arrive someday when conditions are finally right. The kingdom is here now, within you, as you, in this very moment, waiting only to be recognized and lived from fully. The impact of truly grasping this cannot be measured, because it shifts your entire foundation from seeking to being, from becoming to recognizing, from separation to wholeness. And when you live from this understanding, you fulfill Jesus' promise in ways that extend far beyond what you could imagine from your current perspective. If this entire exploration has awakened something within you, a recognition of what you've always known but perhaps forgotten, type in the comments, "The kingdom has always been within me." If you've stayed with me through this entire exploration, I want you to know that's not by accident. Something within you recognized the truth in these words, and that recognition is the kingdom awakening to itself. You wouldn't have made it this far if this message wasn't meant to find you at exactly this moment in your journey. I create these videos because I believe this understanding has the power to transform lives in ways that most spiritual teachings never touch. Not through complex practices or rigid doctrines, but through simple recognition of what's always been true. If this resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring these deeper dimensions of Jesus' teachings that often get overlooked, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. Each video is designed to peel back another layer, to reveal another facet of the profound wisdom that's been hiding in plain sight. And if this message landed in your heart the way I hoped it would, leave a comment saying, "This message was meant for me, so I know you were here. So I know this conversation reached you." That connection matters more than you might think. If you found value in our time together today, a simple like on the video helps this message reach others who are searching for the same understanding you've discovered here. It's a small gesture that creates a ripple effect, allowing the kingdom to recognize itself in more and more people. There's a video right here that takes this understanding even deeper, exploring how this same kingdom consciousness transforms the way you pray and connect with divine presence. Click and continue with me over there, because what we've uncovered today is just the beginning of what becomes possible when you live from the kingdom within.